Okay, it is September 27th, 2024. We are at Art All Night. Could you tell us your name?
I'm Judith Fisher.
Judy, could you tell us a bit about how long you've lived in the neighborhood for? In Mount Pleasant?
Okay, I moved to Washington in September 1967 to attend Howard University. And in September 1968, I moved into Meridian Hill, which is part of, I guess it's called Columbia Heights now. And when I graduated from Howard in 1971, I moved into Adams Morgan, and I've been in this neighborhood ever since 1971.
That's incredible. What a fascinating time period.
Yeah.
To be in college at Howard. So, oh gosh. Well, I want to focus in on your experience in Adams Morgan and the neighborhood. Obviously, being in college would have had you would have had some experiences. But what are some of your earliest memories of the neighborhood?
Well, Mount Pleasant Street was really pretty different. They had an antique store run by this guy named Logan, who I think he also ran the bar across the street, and his wife had a dry cleaners. Okay, and that's all gone now, of course. And the other memory, when I was at Howard, we used to come to, Lamont and Mount Pleasant Street on the corner there. There's a shoe shop, and there was a pizza place there. And it was run by this old Italian man and his African-American wife, who was also old. And we would go in there and order a pizza, and he'd, be tossing the dough and then putting sauce on it and so on and putting it in the oven. And I think they were like $3 or something like that, $2.50. So I did that a lot at Howard. I ate a lot on Mount Pleasant Street. And it was pretty lively. It was a pretty lively place. Not that many Hispanics at the beginning. They didn't come in till later. But there were a lot of black people and a lot of black homeowners in Mount Pleasant at that time.
Wow. And so, and what were some of the other businesses besides the pizza place that you remember?
Oh, and Logan's. The other places on Mount Pleasant Street, I don't remember so much. One on Columbia Road, when I first moved in the neighborhood, where Feet Fleet is, in that stretch, there was a souvenir shop. Okay, that was like really big. And it was mostly like, it was run by Asians, and they had a lot of Asian artifacts there, and Buddhas and all that type of thing along that street, incense and candles and so on. And so yeah, that's what I remember. And also on 18th Street, not 18th, what is that? Columbia Road, there was, and I can't think of the name of the restaurant, it was a Cuban restaurant. I'll think of it when we end. Anyway, it was, you had to order ahead of time, because they just made everything to order, and I'll think of it when this is over. Yeah, that was Columbia Road. And there used to be a Giant and a Safeway on Columbia Road. All right. And then the Safeway bought out the Giant and expanded. Okay.
Wow. So you said you moved into the early 70s in Adams Morgan.
Yeah.
And what were some of the sources of community for you, the people and the places? Or?
Well, there were a lot of little coffee shops in basements. Right. One was called Dengani's Den, and it was run by this guy named Piper. And, they had black poetry readings and that type of thing. And in my neighborhood, when I moved out of the dorm, I moved on to Wyoming Avenue. And at the time, there were a lot of young people on Wyoming Avenue living in apartments. And the apartments were owned by these three men. and one was black, Mr. My memory's going. Anyway, they wanted to make sure that everything stay affordable. And so they organized themselves into the Wyoming Associates, and they would just really rent to people like me, you know, because my father was covering my costs after that. But so yeah, there were a lot of young people on that street, and we moved from apartment to apartment. My first apartment was 1818 Wyoming, and it was in the basement, and it had a patio and parking, and it was $110 a month. And, yeah. And I had a friend who lived across the street in what was Admiral Perry's house, you know, some historical house. And she was going off to graduate school in Michigan. And so I moved into her apartment, which was a 1-bedroom, and was there for a really long time. Anyway, I mean, all the places that I've lived in Adams Morgan, I found through friends or people moving out, you know, that type of thing. Every last one of them.
Wow. And where did you find those friends that helped you find the apartment?
Okay. Well, Malvina was the friend who I moved into her apartment when she went to graduate school. And from there, I worked at what's called Barbara Chambers Daycare Center. But at that time, it was called Columbia Road Children's Center. And I had a friend there who was the administrative person, Marcel. And Marcel and her family lived in Harvard Hall. Anyway, Marcel's mother-in-law died and left Marcel and her husband and their 2 kids a house in Northeast. And so I moved into Marcel's apartment in Harvard Hall, which, you know, was a bedroom, but Harvard Hall had those wonderful enclosed porches, you know. And so that was the second connection. Anyway, after I was there in Harvard Hall for a really long time, like maybe 10, 12 years. Anyway, I was a caregiver for my mom, and we were living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and I was basically sleeping on the enclosed porch. And so I was running a daycare center at the time, and, you know, I would talk to a parent about my tale of woe about where I was living. And so one day, her name was Rashida, she showed up early to pick up her child and said, well, I'm leaving him here, and you and I are going to, she had pulled a listing of all the co-ops and condos in Adams Morgan that had vacancies. And so we went to all these apartment buildings, you know, that were going co-op, because that was happening a lot in the 1980s. And I went into this building, and you know, that was in renovation, or moderate renovation, actually low-key renovation. And I saw this apartment, and since my mother was living with me, you know, I saw this apartment on the ground floor. So there was a door you could come into the building and then go into the apartment. And it was a 2-bedroom apartment. Didn't have a lot of light, but I figured it would work for us. Anyway, the story goes, I took my sister to visit it after I put down the earnest money on it. And my sister walked into the apartment, and she said, well, you know, Mom's not going to be living forever, and you're going to be in the basement. So I said, oh, okay. And so there was another apartment that they were using for storage that was up on a higher floor. And so I went and I looked at that, and I ended up buying that. And I've been there for like 35, 36 years in the same apartment.
That's
Raised my
incredible.
child there.
Wow.
I paid $54,000 for that apartment. All right.
And
Anyway.
And so how have things stayed the same or changed over time since?
Well, there used to be a lot of families, and now in the neighborhood there are more families. But there was a period when there weren't a lot of families. And in my building, there was a period when my daughter was the only child. And then there was a period when there were lots of kids in the building, you know. So that's changed. I think when people live in apartments and they start having families, they move to bigger places. But I was a single mom, just had one child, so it was big enough for us, you know. So that's changed a lot. And more dogs around, a lot of dogs around, you know.
What do you think of those dogs?
You know, I mean, I don't care.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, I like dogs, I like cats, I've had cats. So, what else has changed? The park across the street has gotten renovated several times. What's that, Walter Pierce Park? And it used to be really bad. You know, I mean, it didn't have much stuff for kids and so on. I had a sandbox that was like a scourge. Anyway. Yeah. And of course, the prices have just skyrocketed. You know, which is kind of sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You think it would be possible to do what you did back then?
No, oh no. I mean, I live on a pension and Social Security, right? No, I couldn't afford to live in this neighborhood if I was moving. Well, I wouldn't even look at moving in here. I'd be in senior housing in Maryland someplace.
And do you think anything for your daughter, did you say?
Yeah. Well, she lives in Philadelphia.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, with no intention of coming back to DC. I mean, it really is just too expensive for a young family, and she has a family, you know. And she's doing fine in Philadelphia. You know, has a nice place, reasonable, you know, just.
Wow. And so in the future, like moving, let's say 5 years from now.
Oh, I won't be living here 5 years from now.
No?
No.
Where do you see yourself?
Probably in some type of senior building or some type of CRCC.
And have you thought about where, or like?
No, I mean, DC doesn't have very much that's affordable now. Maryland has more. Or I may go back to Philadelphia, that's where I'm from. And my daughter lives there, you know.
And what would you like for the neighborhood, even as you move on?
Well, the neighborhood needs more affordable housing. Okay. And otherwise, you know, it's going to be like Georgetown, if it's not already. Yeah. So it needs more affordable housing. And people talk about the nice mix and so on. Well, that's not really happening anymore. There's very little mix. Anyway, so that's it. I'm sweating. So
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate you.